I think when you read to your son when he was a baby, he just probably went. I mean, your voice is, I don't know, calming.
Thank you.
I do
Yeah.
have an announcement,
Okay.
sort
What's
of.
that, Donna?
I
Okay.
am planning this Sunday with a friend of mine going to St. Michael's All Angels Charismatic Episcopalian Church.
Wow,
Okay.
that's a
And
mouthful.
I had to go look up charismatic and actually what it was. Um, I think I'm probably used to a calmer service, but we'll see what happens.
The charismatic comes from a charismatic comes from a word, a Greek word that means gifts, and so they generally charismatic churches celebrate gifts of the Holy Spirit. Like sometimes, well, it can take various expressions.
Tongues.
Frequently means the speaking in a heavenly language, tongues. Yeah, so that's generally one thing that happens, but there can be other things as well. I've been in lots of charismatic services, so that'll be maybe a new experience. Yeah, it'll be
Definitely.
yeah.
And I think she was raised Lutheran, and what she was looking for was an Orthodox Christian church. Somebody that she has been listening to on YouTube, and she likes how he talks. I mean, I'm down here with people that teased on the Bible.
Do you remember what the person's name? It wasn't Brad Jersak, was it?
I'm not sure. I'd have to go back and look. Older man, white hair,
Okay.
a little bit heavy set.
Okay. Anyway, well, we can go ahead here. I'm not sure the best way to do this because we have a good group here. I don't know how far we want to go because we're starting to get into some really meaty portions, but I thought I'd start with one just touching on a couple of things we were talking about last week that were concerning basically, and I don't know, Greg was the one that raised the issue, so I'm not sure if we need to deal with them in detail, but he was talking about the timeline, and I just thought I'd give a brief idea of the timeline of Jewish history in terms of the later Jewish history after the monarchy. And
Can I interrupt for just a minute?
you sure can.
I just got a text, and it looks like there's bomb threats going on in the Chicago public libraries at this time. Um, and the FBI is involved, and it looks like all the libraries um, are like taking cover. So
Oh, oh,
if we could just please keep them in prayer. I just got this text at 10:58.
Thank you.
Sorry, you guys, but I know we're prayer warriors. So um, yeah,
thank you.
okay. Yeah, let's keep them in prayer, please.
Can't. Yeah, that has to be so terrifying for the employees of the library and their families, and the uncertainty of it. It just
Yes.
it seems that I'm not sure if it's unique to now, but it seems right now everything there's so much violence, gun violence, and threats of violence, terrorism. It's just
Yeah.
it's really a
My
hard time
feeling is there's something loose on the earth and it's getting stronger and meaner.
to live. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks, Pam. Anyway, so I thought I'd just give some brief highlights just to kind of, because I don't think I was as thorough as I could have been in terms of how the history of the Hebrew people of the nations of Israel and Judah, how they developed. So starting in 1000 BCE. BCE is before the Common Era. Before they used to call it just BC. Before they used to call it before Christ, but now it's historically it's generally referred to as BCE. About 1000 or so. That's when David became king, and he was king somewhere between 1010 and 970. And after him, then we had the kingdom of Solomon, and in 960 BCE, the first temple was completed. Okay, and then the kingdoms of Judah and Israel separated, not celebrated, separated around 931 BCE. So then that takes us to the most significant thing next was when the kingdom of Israel, the northern kingdom, fell to the Assyrian Empire. At that point, the kingdom of Israel was no more. It was just Judah. Then during that time, King Josiah ruled, and in 586, the southern kingdom, they fell to Nebuchadnezzar, and they went into exile at 586. But then Nebuchadnezzar's empire was overthrown by the Persian Empire of Cyrus in 539, and in 539, Cyrus allowed the Jews to return to their land. In 516 BC, they built the second temple. It was nothing like the first temple. It wasn't near as grand. It was much more modest, but they did reconsecrate the second temple. Then the next major thing that happened was in 322, Alexander the Great conquers Phoenicia and Gaza, the Gaza Strip, which Israel is a part of. So they were under Greek rule, well, Macedonian, and that happened in 332. And then they overthrew, there was what was called the Maccabean Revolt. Have you heard of the Maccabees before? Yeah, that's a book in the Apocrypha. And then they overthrew what turned out to be Alexander's son, and they ruled, and their revolt was 150 to 100 CE. So from 140 to 63 BCE, the Israel ruled itself again through the Hasmonean dynasty, and that was for about 40, nearly not quite 100 years. And then in 63 BCE, Rome laid siege and took over Jerusalem and entered the temple. And that kind of takes us to where we are now. The reason I wanted to run this past us is because they're going to be talking in this next chapter about the abomination of desolation, and that kind of fits into what the whole history, the whole timeline was here. So anybody else have any questions or thoughts about what we talked about last week? If not, then would someone want to start? I think we were starting with chapter 24. Is everybody on the same page with that? Yeah. So would someone volunteer to read, say, wow, I'm trying to figure the best, like from verse 1 through.
Why don't you do through 12?
What's that, Leslie?
Why don't you just go through 12? That's before the woes start.
Well, we'll go through 14. Yeah. Someone want to read one through chapter 24, verses 1 through 14?
No, we're in 23.
Are we?
Yeah.
Okay.
We haven't done the woes.
Okay. I was at the wrong place. I'm glad you spoke up. All right, then go ahead. Why doesn't someone? Okay. Who would like to read the first? What's the first section here? Through verse. Yeah, verse 12 is fine. Yeah.
And that's before the woes start. If you get too far, then you're going to get all those woes. And anyway, you want me to read?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm reading from the NRSV, just so you know. Then Jesus said to the crowds and to his disciples, the scribes and the Pharisees sit on Mount Moses' seat. Therefore, do whatever they teach you and follow it. But do not do as they do, for they do not practice what they teach. They tie up heavy burdens, hard to bear, and lay them on the shoulders of others. But they themselves are unwilling to lift a finger to move them. They do all their deeds to be seen by others, for they make their phylacteries broad and their fringes long. They love to have the place of honor at the banquets and the best seats in the synagogues, and to be greeted with respect in the marketplaces, and to have people call them rabbi. But you are not to be called rabbi, for you have one teacher, and you are all students. And call no one your father on earth, for you have one Father, the one in heaven. Nor are you to be called called instructors, for you have one instructor, the Messiah. The greatest among you will be your servant. All who exalt themselves will be humbled, and all who humble themselves will be exalted. Okay, David, you have to explain the word phylacteries.
Okay. I will.
Mhm.
They had these little boxes, and they put certain scriptures in them, and they tied the phylacteries. They had like a ribbon, and they tied one around their forehead, and then they put one on their wrist. And especially when they prayed, they put these phylacteries on, and they create. I'm not sure. I think they might have contained the Shema and other scriptures, and they wore them as they prayed. So they're these little boxes they wear, and the fringes are the same thing. They're on prayer shawls they wear when they pray. And so he's talking about the fact that when the Pharisees and some of them prayed, people had a lot of money. They would have big fancy phylacteries and long fringes and everything to demonstrate their piety. They thought that this having particularly ostentatious ones of those would show that they were more pious than the rest of the people. And it goes along with the whole thing that they're talking about is the concept that they believe that leaders were leaders because they were in charge, and they were the rulers over the people. And he's talking about something entirely different in chapter 12. Or verse 12 rather, I'm sorry. All who exalt themselves will be humbled, and all who humble themselves will be exalted. I've heard it often referred to as an upside down kingdom, instead of like the kingdom of the earth, where the people on top, the rulers, they did so by force, by power, by violence, authority. Instead, he's saying in his kingdom, it's going to be different. It's going to be the humble, the people who humbly serve others, that are going to be the greatest among you. And so previously he was talking about how a lot of these terms of respect that they use in regard to the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the rulers of the religion, they really shouldn't be claiming for themselves, but that that kind of adulation or respect should be reserved to God alone. Anything else? Anything else someone saw in there that was interesting? Maybe a different translation or something. Have a question about? If not, why don't we go ahead with verse 13? And we're going to be going through a series of woes. And these woes sometimes they see as almost as a parallel, the opposite parallel to the Beatitudes. So it's kind of the flip side, the other side of the coin. What's going to happen to people who are behaving differently? So would someone like to read 15 through, let's see, where should we go?
13.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Thank you for the correction. This is all one section, so we're just going to have to arbitrarily cut it up unless someone wants to read the whole thing. We can go through, we can go 13 through, let's say, 22. Okay. Would someone like to read that?
I would.
Dawn,
Go ahead,
great.
Dawn.
Okay, this is, of course, the message. I've had it with you. You're hopeless. You religious scholars, you're Pharisees, frauds. Your lives are roadblocks to God's kingdom. You refuse to enter and won't let anyone else in either. You're hopeless. You're religious scholars and Pharisees, frauds. You go halfway around the world to make a convert, but once you get him, you make him into a replica of yourselves. Double damn. You're hopeless. What arrogant stupidity. You say if someone makes a promise with his fingers crossed, that's nothing. But if he swears with his hand on the Bible, that's serious. What ignorance. Does the leather of the Bible carry more weight than the skin of your hand? And what about this piece of trivia? If you shake hands on a promise, that's nothing. But if you raise your hand that God is your witness, that's serious. What ridiculous hair splitting. What difference does it make whether you shake hands or raise hands? A promise is a promise. What difference does it make if you make your promise inside or outside a house of worship? A promise is a promise. God is present, watching, and holding you accountable regardless. Is that where I can keep going?
Yeah, why don't you keep going? This is all kind of one section. So,
okay.
And I like what the message is doing here. So go right ahead.
You're hopeless. You're religious scholars and Pharisees, frauds. You keep meticulous account books, tithing on every nickel and dime you get. But on the meat of God's law, things like fairness, compassion, and commitment, the absolute basics, you carelessly take it or leave it. Careful bookkeeping is commendable, but the basics are required. Do you have any idea how silly you look writing a life story that's turned from start to finish nitpicking over commas and semicolons? You're hopeless, you religious scholars and Pharisees, frauds. You buff the surface of your cup and bowl so that they sparkle in the sunlight, while the insides are maggoty with your greed and gluttony. Stupid Pharisees. Scour the insides, and then the gleaming surface will mean something. You're hopeless, you religious scholars and Pharisees, frauds. You're like manicured grave plots, grass clipped and the flowers bright. But 6 feet down, it's all rotting bones and worm-eaten flesh. People look at you and think you are saints, but beneath the skin, you're total frauds. You're hopeless, you religious scholars and Pharisees, frauds. You build granite tombs for your prophets and marble monuments for your saints. And you say that if you had lived in the days of your ancestors, no blood would have been on your hands. You protest too much. You're cut from the same cloth as those murderers and daily add to the death count. Snakes, cold-blooded snakes. You think you can worm your way out of this? Never have to pay the piper? It's on account of people like you that I send prophets and wise guides and scholars generation after generation and generation after generation. You treat them like dirt, greeting them with lynch mobs, hounding them with abuse. You can't squirm out of this. Every drop of righteous blood ever spilled on this earth, beginning with the blood of that good man Abel, right down to the blood of Zechariah, Berachaka's son, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, who
That's
you
fine.
murdered at his parent at his prayers is on your head. All this I'm telling you is coming down on you, on your generation. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, murder of prophets, killer of the ones who brought you God's news. How often I have ached to embrace your children, the way a hen gathers her chicks under her wing, and you wouldn't let me. Now you're so desolate, nothing but a ghost town. What is there left to say? Only this. I'm out of here soon. The next time you see me, you'll say, oh, God has blessed him. He's coming, bringing God's rule. And there ends 23. Hello?
It would appear that everybody has frozen.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah.
Well, now,
It looks like Diane, can you hear us?
I can hear you.
We've lost David.
and his beautiful wife.
We froze, yeah.
Thank you, Lauren.
Oh, no problem.
Yes. Appreciate it. Yeah, so the only thing I have to say about that passage is I wish Jesus would speak his mind and not hold back. You know, he was yeah, he was speaking some pretty plain language here, wasn't he?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. It's not a huge surprise with him speaking this way and the way the controversy's been building with everything and the cleansing of the temple. It's not surprising that he gets crucified not long after that, is it?
No, he said things they didn't want to hear.
I guess not. Yeah, not too many people like to be called snakes and whitewashed tombs, and I enjoyed
A
reading the
maggoty bowl.
message. I enjoy reading the message. The exact images that they have in the message are not quite the same as they are in the NRSV, but they really illustrate what the other passage is trying to say about just how hypocritical they appear to be. Well, that they are, from Jesus' perspective, that they're all about outward appearances. They're all about how things look to the world around them. They're not concerned with the most important things, the inner things. So they're talking about washing, like you talked about, washing the outside of the bowl, but the inside is a mess. And desiring, to be at the head of the table. But at the end of this chapter, thanks. Nice to see you, Leslie. At the end of this chapter in verse 37, or yes, I think that's one of the most poignant passages in the New Testament, where Jesus says, "Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to it. How often have I desired to gather your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings, and you were not willing. See, your house is left to you desolate." And if you think of this in the context of what happens in 70, AD 70, or Common Era 70, when Jerusalem is just utterly destroyed, you see that Jerusalem, Jesus was trying to offer them a different kingdom, a different way. And they ignored him. They were continued in their rebellion to Rome. And as a result, Rome just completely destroyed Jerusalem. They estimate over 1 million Jews were killed when the Romans took over there. They destroyed the temple. And we'll hear a little more about some of that too. But as a religion, as a country, they were just completely destroyed. And Jesus was trying to prevent that, trying to show them another way, and yet they wouldn't do it. And as a result of that, there was tremendous destruction. Anything else anybody has to say about that? Anything else they noticed?
One thing I noticed too is there is no 14. There's no verse 14 out there but in my notes, it says verse 14 says, "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you devour widows' houses, and for the sake of appearance you make long prayers. Therefore you will receive the greater condemnation," which was not in the woes or I really like the way the Message translated it. I thought it was very interesting. Sometimes a little hard to follow along in the NRSV when you're reading the Message, but that's okay.
That really goes both ways.
I know, I'm sure it is. And I do have a copy of the Message here, but I just didn't pull it out this morning.
So the question would become then, why is there no verse 14 in the versions we currently have? Well, what's probably happened is verse 14 was probably in the King James, because the manuscripts that the King James used had verse 14 in it. But most of these other translations that we're currently using use more updated translations, or more updated or more accurate manuscripts. And in these manuscripts, most of them are older as well than the ones used for the King James. It's hard to understand, but the manuscripts that they had when they translated the King James are not as old as some of the manuscripts we have for the newer translations, because we found manuscripts since the King James was translated. The climate in Palestine is very dry. And so when you write something down on papyrus or something like that, and you put it in a vase and you hide it in a cave or something or somewhere, the climate is so dry that the paper doesn't just, decay and go away. There's not a lot of humidity. So through various archaeological finds and things, they've discovered manuscripts that are older than the ones they had back when the King James Version of the Bible was translated. And so they look at some of these older translations and they see that what is called verse 14 in the King James Bible is not there in these older transcripts. So the assumption that the people who are experts in translating and manuscripts and things like that say, they believe what happened was this was added later in other transcripts, that the people who were either copying or writing the transcripts for some reason, they put this additional verse in there, and probably most accurately, as accurate as they can get to what the original, what they call the autograph, the first manuscript, as that verse 14 probably was not there. It was something that someone added later as a kind of editorial comment. So that's probably why verse 14 isn't there.
The Children's Living Bible has chapter 14.
Or verse 14. Yeah. So the thing is with manuscripts, there's something that's as old as even the New Testament is. It's several thousand years old. And one of the first tasks you have to do when you're translating the Bible is you have to go back and find out what the original actually said. And since there are so many pieces and bits from different time frames and different places in the world, we don't have the originals. We don't have what Matthew wrote down on. We have things that happened that are copies of that from later on. And so trying to determine what, as close as you can, to what Matthew actually wrote down, or the writer of this book, is a process that is difficult to do because it's 2,000 years. Well, maybe not quite, but 1,900 years ago. So trying to determine what it says is the first step in the process of when you make a translation. So when you make a translation, one of the things you need to understand is they have to decide which manuscripts they're going to use. Now, in a process of time, there have been people who are experts in this, and they've kind of put together a conglomeration. There are different texts. One's called the Nestle Aland, and then there's United Bible Society. But they have these New Testaments that are in the Koine Greek, but all throughout them, there are like little notes. Like you can see in most new versions, they'll have those little subscripts, and they'll take you to notes at the end about possible variations. And what these little notes are usually referring to are how the different manuscripts differ, how they use different wording, and a lot of times it doesn't affect the meaning as a whole, but it is certain it's different ways of saying things. And if you look at the New Testament that they have, where the conglomeration, they'll have a section on top that's the actual text, and they'll have what's on the bottom of it, what's called the apparatus, and these are all the notes that show what the different manuscripts say and all the differences there are. So it's a really difficult process of trying to determine as best as we can what Matthew was trying to say. And there's all kinds of rules and formulas they use. But so that's just an idea of why verse 14 may not be there, because most modern scholars believe that probably verse 14 wasn't in the original manuscript that Matthew wrote down. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So you know what? I think we're just going to end there today, and that way we can kind of say we went through chapter 23, and we can pick up with chapter 24 next week and go forward from there. We got through this section was not very edifying in terms of, it wasn't very uplifting. It was basically Jesus taking him to task, and boy, he does. Oh yeah. He doesn't make any bones about it. He doesn't pull any punches. He's basically saying that the way that the leaders of the religion today are practicing religion is not the kind of kingdom, is not the kind of religion, the kingdom I'm bringing. It's a completely different set of values. So anybody have anything else for the good of the group?
No, I love our Bible study.
Well, thanks, Pam. It's nice of you to say. I enjoy doing it too.
Yeah.
I hope everything goes well with you. I hope everything goes well with everybody. Charity feels better and all that. And then we'll meet together next Wednesday. Thanks for everybody for being here.
Okay,
you.
have a blessed week.
You
I
too.
wanted to say, Dave, I thoroughly enjoy listening to the information you give. I really appreciate it.
That's nice for you to say, Dawn. I appreciate the opportunity. I spent 7 years of my life studying Bible, and for a long time I didn't have any outlet for it. And this gives me a chance to share a little bit, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to do that. So,
And we appreciate you too.
I enjoy you guys. You have a good week. We'll talk to you later.
Take care.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye.
Hey, Lauren.